Lovely. Thank you. Yeah, so today I'm going to have a conversation about insights into coach athlete competition preparation discussions. Um, it's sort of split into a couple of different parts. One, how I got to where we are with this. And then there'll be a chance for conversations, questions at the end. So don't worry about asking questions. If you've got any whilst we're going, feel free to unmute and ask. It's quite informal, to be fair. So a little bit of background about me. Um, Work across multiple sports, worked, yeah, European World Championships, um, Commonwealth Championships gold medalists, British world record holders, BSc in sport, MSc in psychology, currently doing a PhD. It's one of UK sports high performance coaches. Yeah, and a senior lecturer in sports coaching at Sunderland University. So I've been coaching for about 20 years across multiple different sports at world-class level. So kind of got lots of experience of on the ground, but with an academic background as well that links it all together. So where did this all come from? So based on some research that I did with elite athletes, and elite athletes there was defined as had to have competed at Olympic or European or World Championships in laser run of modern pentathlon. The question was around the physical response to psychological pressure, and it's a qualitative piece, but was looking at where does psychological pressure come from? When does psychological pressure start? What were the physical changes due to psychological pressure? And were there any performance pressure strategies at the time? Now, this wasn't about going in and giving advice. This was about what is it on the ground at that moment in time and what was happening. Okay. So this is going to be a little bit interactive today. I'm not just going to talk to a screen for 20 minutes because it'll be quite boring for me. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and then we're going to give the answers that what came back from the research that I did. So, first question. Where does performance pressure come from? 60 seconds, no more than that. Have a think. We're talking about elite athletes at world-class level. So once you've had 60 seconds, I'm going to just give a brief description of what the athletes said they found. Okay, it's great to see some of the answers going into the chat. Okay, we're going to stop it there. Okay, so yeah, so we had a few ideas came up in the chat there. Financial funding, expectations, performing again at the highest level, fans, media pressure, yourself. So athletes, what they decided or what they fed back or what came out of the study. Performance pressure, self-generated, fueled mainly by personal expectations, wanting to achieve a particular thing, or I am better than. The I am better than was normally relevant within the same squads. So if you had two or three athletes at World Championships, they had their perception of they were better than someone else. So they had to be better than that person on the ground on the day. Influence of stakeholders, coaches, other athletes, NGBs, etc. Historical results, if they'd won it before, they expected they could win it again, which is fine. And then ranking outcomes, squad selection, places on programs, funding, all sorts of little things like that came out of it. Okay. But it was really apparent that they were the key messages that were coming out of it. So we're going again. When do I start feeling performance pressure? 60 seconds, no more. Okay, as soon as you've entered the competition. Okay. 24 hours. Thirty seconds ago. It's interesting because we'll all have perceptions what we believe the answers are. Okay, so I'm going to go and start talking through what they did say. Whoops, sorry. Okay, so performance pressure starts before the competition day, absolutely. And some of the athletes were saying it was weeks beforehand. Particularly remember one that was 2 or 3 weeks beforehand in training, they were linking their competitive outcomes to their training outcomes, which absolutely caused chaos in their training, caused so much disruption to preparation, training, their general mental health. So far out within the competitive environment, once under warm up, the majority of the athletes, once they got surrounded by the peers, felt their energy levels lift and the positive feeling grow and the pressure change. There's a definitive pressure change at that point. So we've got another question. Thinking about the athletes, they're laser run athletes. So part of the modern pentathlon, they run, they shoot, they run, they shoot, they run, they shoot. What do you think their physical responses to psychological pressure was? Now, this was like the key area of what we were looking at. What might they have done differently? Again, only 60 seconds. Okay, it's great. People throwing things in chat is good. Right, I'm going to just stop that there again. Let me just close my chat. Okay, so physical response to psychological pressure, tension, over gripping the pistol, squeezing it so much harder, which does increase movement. It also slows them down. Increasing and rushing or slowing down the pace within the run. That was specifically if they had a slow shoot when they left the running range, the shooting range to get back into the run, they would then accelerate and overrun race pace, which then fatigues them going back round, which then doesn't lead to a good performance. Rushing the technical process, going so fast, over accelerating all the key elements. Conversely, some people are slowing down parts of the process to focus on individual parts. So trying to make very individual parts of the process better rather than just letting it flow, I suppose. And then really focusing on the performance outcome. So rather than just letting things happen, because you don't have to be overly successful. If you miss a shot, it doesn't matter. If you're doing it quickly, you just keep going. And that kind of went out of the window a little bit once they started to work on increasing the accuracy. Okay, I'm not going to ask you about performance pressure strategies. I imagine everyone knows a little bit about them on this call. But the three things that came back a lot from them were self-talk, process rehearsal, visualization, both first person and third person perspective, and having a focus on the breathing rather than process elements, which is kind of a big thing within laser run shooting. So pressure. Now, the whole point of that was just to set the scene of what an athlete believes is happening. Okay. Now, one of the biggest things to come out of this was the conversations and semi-structured interviews that I had with athletes. They started to wonder why their coaches don't have the same similar conversations with them. So I was asking about what changes, what do you feel like when you're under pressure? What do you know happens under pressure? If I'm seeing you perform well, what am I seeing? If I'm seeing you not performing, what am I seeing? And things they then led into what support do you need if it's going well? What support do you need if it's not going well? And it transpired that the coaches at the time weren't having these conversations with the athletes. I'm just going to stop screen sharing for a moment because it's kind of pointless just staring at a PowerPoint for me at the moment. So it transpired that a lot of athletes have multiple coaches. So, for example, I'm leaving straight after this call. I'm flying out to Croatia to European Championships. I'll be working with an athlete that I work with on a weekly basis, and an athlete I might see once a year. So these conversations are so crucial. So one of the things we'll be doing tomorrow is having a structured, not an interview, but structured conversation as a coach and athlete about exactly those things. If you're feeling pressure, what's it going to look like? What support do you need? If you're having a really good performance, what do you need from me as a coach? Do you need any interactions? Or if it's going wrong, do you want me just to leave you to it, or do you want me to intervene and get involved? So that was one of the big key areas. It's how do we have these conversations and why do we have these conversations? And then who do we have these conversations with? Now I'm just going to share my screen again, if you just bear with me. Okay, so we talked a lot about with the athletes, how do they know what happens when they're under pressure? So if I want to say to an athlete, explain to me what I'm going to see when it's not going well, how do they even know it anyway? And we use a lot of third person observation, which might be coach led or self analysis of video. One of the things that I really encourage all athletes to do, and you might think it's a good thing, you might not, is hot debriefs without external influences. And one of the reasons behind that is when I work with a lot of athletes, they will do their performance, they'll come off, and people will be like, "Oh, well done," or "That was good," or lots of other comments before they actually have a chance to think and reflect. And if I've just gone and performed subpar, haven't done very well, but then suddenly someone's saying, "Wow, that was amazing, well done," it's going to start causing a little bit of conflict in my reflection. So we've started with a lot of athletes, getting them to debrief into their phones with voice notes before they speak to anybody else, to try and get some real lived experiences, and then doing cued reflection with coaches. So yeah. Now, I think the key thing is a lot of the athletes then have a level of fear and about communicating with their coaching team. So communication is crucial, awkward sometimes. How do you, as an athlete, say to a coach, "I don't want your support. If it's going bad, I want to work through this today on my own. If I need you, I will ask you." And a lot of athletes are not are fearful, are fearful about having those conversations. And normally, when they have those conversations, they don't have a goal. They don't plan the conversation. They don't make notes. It'll be quite unofficial, informal, where actually they're probably really crucial conversations to be having that are quite important to the outcome of what's about to happen. But one of the other key things was the athletes generally didn't understand the expectations. So I was talking to an athlete at a pre-Europeans camp last week. They were feeling a lot of pressure from the national governing body because they believed they want them to perform at a particular level. I asked them why they thought that. They didn't know. I asked the governing body. The governing body said, "No, we just want them to go for experience." But that conversation hadn't happened, so no one knew where they stood. So there was a little bit of confusion, and it just causes chaos, to be honest. And we need to encourage athletes to own those conversations. They sometimes forget it's about them as individuals. Um, just a few key messages before I'll jump on to take questions. Athletes need to know what it feels like when it's going well and what it feels like when it's not going well. Performance strategies are key, and challenge into training programs. Coaches, again, they need to know what it looks like when it's not going well, or even when it's going well. Constrain challenges within training and pre-plan interventions to support the athlete. So I'll know this week at the Europeans what I need to do if it's not going well, and it'll be agreed prior with the athletes. And then get the stakeholders to remove expectations and perform expectations, and decide how measuring success is actually appropriate, because it can be different for everybody, and use individual plans so expectations are met. So I know and appreciate I might have just talked at you for nearly 20 minutes actually. But I do apologize. It's a subject I'm quite passionate about, as you can probably tell. And yeah, let's go. Let's have some questions. Happy to have a chat for a couple of minutes before we finish. Yeah, go for it, David. Is it David?
Yes. So with kind of like high performance elite type of athletes and having those type of conversations, what I kind of also found as kind of myself being a coach in powerlifting and putting sports psychology into it is that on online type of conversations, a type of like message to message aren't highly effective, but a video call, a structured video call where you turn around and say, look, can we have a video call at certain time? And then making sure we have a goal and discussion about what it is that we're going to talk about. That seems to be a lot more effective than kind of like text to text type of messages. Now, what are your thoughts between face-to-face type of conversations and only online type of conversations? Do you think they are any different? Do you think they can be very similar if some things are done in the right way, or not as much?
I think that depends on the coach-athlete relationship, to be fair. So I prefer face-to-face. I generally do a lot of video calls prior to competitions with athletes. But there are specific athletes that I work with that I may only see 4 or 5 times a year, back in Newcastle, and then they'll go off to train at National Training Centre. But they'll be at major championships, and we can have text conversations. But I feel that's because we all both know the nuances behind things and the interpretation of what we're writing. And I think you miss a lot by text message. I mean, if you know the person really well, I think you can WhatsApp. But I think the key is understanding the athlete first. I mean, either does work, but I do prefer face to face.
Brilliant, thank you.
Probably got a chance for just one more. For Iain, any more questions?
I have a question.
Yes, go on, Alice.
So you mentioned that coaches can use kind of pre-planned interventions for when their athletes are struggling during competitions. I was just wondering like what those interventions would kind of look like, or if it depends. Well, I'm assuming it depends based on the athlete, but just an overview of what they would look like.
Yeah, so it depends on the athlete, absolutely. Also kind of depends on the sport hugely as well. Pistol shooters, so I work with Olympic and Paralympic pistol shooters. So Olympic pistol shooters, they may come off for a conversation and we'll have discussed what we want in that conversation prior. So the intervention could be technical. It could mention nothing to do with technique whatsoever. It could be almost just having a chat about how they feel. And a lot of the stuff that I do when I work with athletes I'm almost a reflective sounding board. So they'll come off, they'll tell me what's not going right. They'll tell me what they need to do to put it right. And then they'll go back on and kind of do it. And I'm almost a dummy that's just standing there, letting them have their little moment and then let them go back on. Slightly different with Paralympic athletes, especially wheelchair users that shoot, because they can't leave the firing point to come off and have a conversation. The coach has to go on to the firing point. So it becomes a lot more calm, a lot more quiet, as you can't disturb the other athletes around you. But again, it's very similar. It's almost allowing the athlete to understand what's not going well, so they can explain what's not going well, so they can explain what they would do to put it right. Because generally they know the answers and they just forget in the moment.
Thank you very much for that, Iain. Some really interesting discussions. I really like the interactive element there, and some nice questions and input from everybody else. So thank you again, Iain. So